So I'm trying to get from like wherever I am, a 2 or 3 up to like a 6. And then I'm trying to bring readers up to maybe like a 5. You want to be a little higher than what you're writing. You don't want to be writing to the exact max of what you know. I finished college and knew I wanted to do something kind of something on my own, creative or entrepreneurship. And really, I started, my first crack was I'm going to try to write music for movies because I wanted to write music, but I didn't. I wanted to be a modern classical artist in the way that not I'm writing classical music, but just what they did, which is they just wrote music and symphonies and stuff, and no lyrics, because I don't really know how to write lyrics. But that there's not really careers like that today. It's hard, right, to be like a just non-lyric composer and but movies is a way you can actually do that. So I started doing that. But I also have like major procrastination issues, and there was no one making me do anything. There was no external deadlines, and I just moved very slowly. And I did, I wrote some scores, and I took some classes to understand how to, work with the different instruments. And I got some reps in, and it was fine, but it was just going very slowly. And in the meantime, I started, tutoring students to kind of pay the bills, and then that turned into me starting a tutoring company. Which is the kind of thing a procrastinator does, is like, the thing that you're not trying to do is the thing you'll focus on, the thing that's not important to you. Because music in the first place was what I was doing when I was procrastinating in college. So I was like, let me just do that full time. But then when I was doing music full time, I was like doing this tutoring thing. I'm like, well, maybe I should do that full time. So I started doing business full time. Procrastinated from that by starting blogging, and I was, and I was like, maybe I should do this full time, and that's when WaitButWhy started. It started as like kind of a part business venture. I had a business partner, Andrew Finn at WaitButWhy, and at our tutoring company, and we kind of thought, well, maybe I could go and just kind of start some kind of media company of some. We had no idea, and then also this was kind of my going back to when I graduated college. I was like, sure, this maybe it'd be the creative thing I really wanted to do. And so I went to Easter Island for a month alone because I wanted to just go somewhere really out of the way, but somewhere also kind of cool and inspiring, hopefully. And wrote a bunch of blog posts, came up with the name of the blog and the design, and came back. I think I procrastinated for like 5 months and actually getting it started, but then got it started mid 2013 as a project that we didn't really know what it was, but it was I was just gonna write best articles I could and see what happened. My other blog, the thing I had been doing was very much on the side. I was like spending 5 hours a week on it and just like writing little write-ups. Here I was like, what if I spent my whole time on this one activity, this one craft? So that was the premise, and it got going right away. Got like a lot of a couple articles went viral of like the first bunch pretty quickly, which was great because you immediately have external pressure, which someone like me needs. Immediately you have readers, and they're expecting now, they're actually visiting the site, waiting for the next post when you said you were going to put it up. So that's great for me. I suddenly had all this pressure to produce and quickly so that they wouldn't leave and they wouldn't forget about me, and get an email list going and trying to sign people up for the email list. So it became this very intense kind of couple of years of like furiously writing and trying to, grow this, early audience. And as that happened, the writing evolved, and the topics got more serious and much longer posts. And I just started to get more confidence that I can get into longer things and people will still want to read it. And I can like take on something more serious as opposed to kind of a funny listicle. And people like it. So I learned that kind of incrementally as I went. And then I started to kind of say, okay, the people who are here, they happen to be people who really like kind of the way I think or the way I write. And so therefore I'm going to like really dig into just what I'm really truly like interested in, and my own, sense of humor. And I'm not going to try to be anything else. I'm not going to try to I'm going to stop trying to like go viral or like, what would like pop on the internet. I'm just going to say like, what is actually going on in my head? What's really interesting to me? What's really funny to me? And just do that stuff. And so that that kind of went from there. Then the articles then kept getting longer and longer and more thorough until I was kind of writing mini books. At which point I decided to just finally write a book, which is what I'm working on now. And then I hope to get back to some shorter posts because I really like those. And I like how you can switch topics every week. And I'm a little fatigued of working on one topic for so long now.
What type of style are you picking for your book? Is it a bunch of isolated content like from the blog, or is it there's a theme throughout?
Yeah. No, this is a very long blog post on a single topic is what this is. This has started out as a post that was supposed to be a short post. And of course that immediately went out the window. It was a post when I started looking around the society around me and I started saying that something's quite wrong. It's not just the normal, like political polarization, but I was like, as a writer who is pretty fearless because I have my own platform, no one can fire me or anything. I found myself being kind of like terrified to write about politics. And I'm not scared to write about other stuff. It was just kind of like, I felt like it was a minefield. And I was like, what's going on? And then just in general, like this was 2016, I started having these thoughts. I know. And I feel like if I write about, with nuance about this whole slew of important topics within society, it'll be this horrible backlash or something. So I was like, what became curious even more than society was why am I so scared? What's that coming from? And who is making me scared? And is that rational or not? Is this normal or is this kind of like a new thing? Are there historical precedents for this kind of thing? So I just didn't know, and I wanted to dig in, and that turned into a very long blog post because it was a lot to talk about. It's like, we have to go back to our evolutionary past and why we're tribal, and we have to go back to the history of the U.S. and we have to talk about the last 60 years in depth and what's going on, and then what's going on now. Let's dig really deep into it. So that turned into a blog series that then got so crazy there that in the middle of the series, I said that I'm not even halfway done, I realized. And this is not a fun place for most people to read this, is sitting on a website or scrolling on their phone. Let's do this right, because there's so much to say here. I've learned a lot from what I've already posted, which was the first bunch of chapters. I've learned a lot because I've gotten a ton of feedback. It's a luxury for an author to be able to put stuff out in the world, get a ton of feedback from thousands of people who are picking apart your stuff, and then get to go write a book with the benefit of really having seen at what has clicked with people, what makes sense, what's confusing, what has been misunderstood, where was I being callous, so it was great. And so then I went and was like, okay, let's just do this right and get this thing out. And that's been now a couple of years and getting very close to and probably going to come out this year. Yeah, I'll be excited to move on. It's not even my favorite thing to write about. I just thought it was a really important thing to write about because I looked around and I said, there's all this cool technology happening, all this cool stuff for the future, like I always think about what's life going to be like in 2030, 2040. And there's so much exciting things, so many exciting possibilities, but all of the good future relies on us as a society being able to talk to each other and make decisions together and cooperate. And if we can't do that, none of that stuff matters. This is how great societies just fall apart. And all those dreams you had about the future, they don't happen. And something much worse happens. So I was like, this is the most important thing to talk about first. Because if we don't get this right, nothing else matters. So we have to figure out what's going on with our society declining in some important way. Then we can get back to all the fun stuff.
Yes. You've got my mind spinning. There's so many things, but I'm excited to put me on the list, man. I want to buy it. I want to hear it. You going to do the Audible?
Yeah, it's going to be audio, ebook, print book, all that stuff. Probably online as well for subscription.
Are you going to read it though? Like with your voice?
Yeah. I'm going to read it. I've had, I'd like to have all my blog posts be audio, and it's a huge amount of time, and I'm not a professional at it. So we worked with a couple of professionals, and they've read a post as like a kind of a trial, and they sound great. It just doesn't sound like me. It's like that's not what that sentence is supposed to sound like. There's this very specific tone to every word here that I realize that is not necessarily obvious. And so I was like, I can't have anyone else do this. I have to do it. So I will be reading the book. Yeah.
Hey, what was the like the origin story for the name? Like, why did you choose Wait But Why?
Well, I was on GoDaddy trying out 1,000 things to see if there's any .coms available, and there really aren't. And at the end, I had a list of a handful where I found the name. I happened to like the name, or maybe like the name, and the .com was available. And so then Wait But Why was on that list. And I thought it had a couple, it was kind of interesting, and it had a couple. It kind of resonated with me. It kind of had it made a point that I think I wanted to kind of bring out in my writing, which was like to try to like try to get past the assumptions that we all have about why everything is the way it is, or what's going on. I think there's often just groupthink that all of us are a part of without realizing it. And I wanted this to be a place of like, let's pause and reflect and really look at what's going on and try to understand why. So I can't remember if I really had that idea when I was coming up with it, or I've like invented that story after. But since then, it has come to mean that to me. So I don't remember whether I actually was thinking that in the beginning. But either way, I was like, okay, this works. I ran it by some people. My wife like nixed like 8 of the ideas. It was some very odd ideas, and like this was one that everyone seemed to like kind of like, and that was the end. I also just kind of, and I still believe this, that I kind of think that it's one of those things where it doesn't really matter. I think a few things don't really matter if you're a writer, if you're trying to be an online writer and get some buzz. I don't think the name matters. Look, a great name can maybe help. A bad name maybe can hurt, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think the look of the website really matters. It matters a little. I don't think that if it's a high quality website with like, if like your social buttons at the bottom of the post where you can like share, if those are like not aligned, which mine weren't, I just don't think, but in the end, what people are there for is the ideas. And if the ideas are good, if the article's making them think and they're delighted by the jokes or whatever, that's 98% of what matters. So I think I had that sense early on that I was like, I'm not going to start hiring someone to make a beautiful site. That's not what's going to be important here. So. Exactly. And by the way, like really nice websites are everywhere. So it's like, you don't even stand out. It's not like, wow, look at the website. It looks so clean. And it's like, every website's nice, right? So it's like, it's like the same where, I try to make my drawings kind of just like the authentic drawings of one single, not very talented artist, because that's actually, okay, that's something that's like a real thing from a real person, versus when you make the graphics too good, now they blend in with every corporation's graphics out there. It's like in a weird way, when you make things really nice, sometimes they actually lose a little bit of it makes it a little harder to stand out.
Yeah. And I like the rawness and the realness. Like I don't know, I love the stick figures, man. Like it's so cool and it feels super genuine. One of my favorite ones was your interview with Elon Musk. Where like the person calls you and like the head of the stick figures on the floor.
That's what actually happened. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. That was crazy. But yeah, I just myself, I happen to like visual things. Like if I open a new book I get, and I'm flipping through and it's full of like comics and like charts, and I'm like thrilled, because that's how I learn. Some people would look at that and be like, what is this? I'd be bored.
They're
great,
aliens.
But I'm like, I like that, and so I'm sure other people like that too, because so that's why I do it, because that's like what I happen to like as a reader.
One thing I am curious about, it's like I read your Fermi Paradox article, and I was wondering, I was like, is he like partnering with a physicist? Like, how is he getting all of this information and like checking it and accuracy? I'm just so curious about that.
Yeah, I mean. So I think of knowledge that you can have on a topic going from like 1 to 10. And I always just try to think about, I'm trying to get to like a 6. That's because there's always some stuff when you learn more, you look back and you're like, oh, okay, I was oversimplifying this, or I didn't. you're never fully oriented to right where you are at your max. So I want to bring people to a 5. And if you're at a 2 and reading one good thorough article brings you to a 5, like that's a really fun experience, right? Like, wow, I just like learned so much about this. I can talk about this now. And now I want to go from there and dig in more. Even if I bring people from a 2 to a 4 or, a 3 to a 4, I mean, it's that's super fun because it's this exhilarating feeling of understanding something better than you did from one article. So if I can do that, that's like a huge success. And none of us in this process, me or the reader, has to be a physicist or talk to a physicist because they're up higher. Now, sometimes I'll ask this question to an expert if it's just going to help fill in the gap. But the internet is an amazing place to learn. And if your goal is to get to a 6, the internet kind of has you covered. And the internet includes, by the way, being able to buy a book on Kindle or iBooks. And just, so for me, there's always, iBooks or Kindle open and there's a bunch of tabs open. And I'll often, that morning have been listening to a podcast or an audiobook and on the topic. And I just kind of immerse myself in it. YouTube, sometimes it's just great. Look, so you can see when something is good or not good, but there are some great teachers on YouTube explaining things. So one of the things with the Fermi Paradox I remember watching is a bunch of like panels and debates and the people who are truly experts arguing with each other. You learn so much hearing an argument. And people disagreeing is where you learn a lot more than, one person just explaining their things because you watch them try to poke holes in each other's things and you get a much more rounded idea. So for the Fermi Paradox, I probably read a ton, a bunch of, first I'll start with like the fun basic articles. I'll read the Gizmodo on it. Just, okay, I'll go read Wikipedia from beginning to end. And Wikipedia is a nice overview. You don't want to trust every single thing as that's 100% accurate because, you don't know if it is, but the beginning, I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to get a picture of the topic. And you read 10 articles, surprising how much you suddenly know about it. And you know where the gaps are and you know where, then you can start to dig in, read some journal articles, which you understand better now because of the first set. You can watch, as I said, a bunch of YouTube videos, first maybe explainers, then I'll start watching the experts debate each other. I might pick up a book or two and read those. And at the end of that, I often am ready to go. For the Fermi Paradox, I wasn't trying to go and explain anything too technical. I was trying to say, so what are all the different people, the people who do think about this for a living? Because the Fermi Paradox is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's when you look at the stars at night and you think there's got to be some life up there, and yet we've never seen any signs of any. That's this paradox. Doesn't make sense, right? It's a big universe. Why have we not seen any, heard any signals, radio signals, seen any kind of activity that would suggest there's life out there? Does that mean there's no life? Does that mean there's a good reason we haven't seen it? And actually, it's an interesting topic because when you dig in, you realize that there are so many fascinating hypotheses. And that's all they are. Is all we have right now is a collection of hypotheses. And so I collected those. And then I did the thing that I think like a good writer should do, which is not just sit there and say, because there's one more step after, I could have just said 13. I think there's 13 hypotheses I have in there. And I could have easily just said 13 reasons, 13 explanations for the Fermi Paradox, or why haven't we seen aliens? 13 hypotheses. That's fine. It's not an awful way to do it. But, it's like if there's a way to do it that's A, I think more interesting, but B, in a way that actually adds a further layer of organization into the reader's head. If they can really be clear, 13 scattered reasons, that's just interesting, but a year later, you're not going to remember. But if you look at it and you say, wait a second, in this case, I thought there were two big categories that were distinct. And that was more important. And within those, you have the potential hypotheses. That to me was what made the article good, because you can present the hypotheses and that's kind of fun. But what I realized, the two hypotheses in this case were the two buckets. One was the experts' hypotheses that suggest that we are alone. So and then the other 10, I think, were no, the people who say, no, we're not alone. It was two camps. One camp says we're alone, and here are some reasons why they say that. And then the other camp says we're not alone. We're almost definitely not alone. And there's a lot of other reasons we wouldn't have seen evidence. And these are both super compelling. It's like, that's why it was so interesting, is I was like, well, I don't know who's right here. And I don't think they know who's right. So I that's just kind of taking you through my process. And then I would, also think about what should the visuals be. And, get once that outline is done, what would this look like visually? And then just kind of knock it out.
Well, you crush it. I love it. You take really complicated things, make them very simple. And then, like you said, you didn't just listatize everything, right? That would be like observing and reporting, but you did some processing on it, right? And so you kind of like chewed our food a little bit for us. You put some of your own thoughts into it and found the groupings and then talked about those. And so that's where I think some of the big value is too.
Yeah. I think outlining is really important, to try to be creative there and just step back and say, well, what's the story here? If I were going to teach this to a group of people in front of a classroom or whatever, like, how could I really make this interesting and not just kind of methodical? That's always like a thought. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. I think the Fermi Paradox was a win in that regard. And I think other ones I've done, I'm like, I made the outline too complicated or, whatever it is, too thorough. I think I often fail at that too. It's a hard skill to try to nail.
So you do heavy outlining first, figure out everything, and then you start writing.
Yeah, I think if it's a really long post, you can't outline in too much detail, because inevitably when you start writing that, there's some creative part of my brain, at least, that does not visit me in the outlining phase. Like, I don't know where it is, but it's not there. And I'm sitting there kind of in left brain mode, trying to structure like an architect. And it's kind of boring myself with this outline. And then I actually start writing, and suddenly like, oh, these connections are coming. And like, oh, this interesting metaphor just popped into my head. And it's amazing how much creativity emerges when actually writing, when the actual process of writing or drawing. So I now that I've learned that lesson, took me a while. But you also can't do no outline, because that creative brain that's writing without some structure will just meander and be redundant. And and you'll miss important parts and you'll explain it in the wrong order. So I try to do it for short posts. I think you can just do a kind of a basic outline, write it out, and you're done. As they get longer and longer, I think you kind of just do the basic structure, and then you go to each section. You start, now it's time to write section 1, and you go and make a little bit more detail, and then you just start writing. And inevitably that's going to change what you want to do with the rest of the sections after you've written the first section.
Excellent. No, I like it. I've only written one book, my first book, and then it's much like building your first anything. You look back on it and you're like, oh man, there's so many things I could have done better.
Behind you?
Oh yeah.
How long did that take you?
All right. So failed attempts. It took me about the first year I kind of failed at it because I didn't know how to write. I had never written, and I made all of these mistakes. And then the thing that ended up working for me was I found this writer online named Vincent. And I said, Vincent, let's get together. I'll pay you for your time. Let's get together like every week for an hour or two, and we'll record the sessions. And I want you to talk to me, and here's some topics I care about. And I want you to learn how I speak, because I don't like books that are written like an editor wrote them. Like, it's just hard to read. I like books that just read like plain English, right? That's why one of the reasons why I like your writing. You just read how you talk, and I love it. And so I met with him. It took about 12 weeks. And every time he took our conversation, went back, listened to it, wrote up some stuff, and then we had another session on it. And so, that whole process took, 3 to 5 months of doing that. So first 1 year of just like complete failure and like not going anywhere, ended up with a bunch of crazy notes, voice memos, like half-baked things. And then once I decided with Vincent, that was like 3 to 5 months, and we had the book. And by the way, I love that you were talking about how you sort of tested your content, because what I did was I took versions of the chapters and I put them on my blog. But at the time, like, I didn't have many people reading, so I just ran like $100 of Facebook ads to my target audience with the blog post, and got like thousands of shares and likes and comments. Wow. And people ripping it apart.
What year was this?
2018, 19.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So continue.
Yeah. So then I got like thousands of likes and comments and everything, and people ripping it in these massive like debates. So I could tell where the tension was on certain topics and which ones mattered more, and then what the different views were. And then I went back and edited the chapter so that, it met those things. But the key mistake that I made because, I put the book out and then I got like a ton of, great feedback on Amazon. And then I got like a bunch of people who were upset. So I realized that there's two camps, at least for this type of book. There's one camp that like wants the story, wants it to be quick and short and like to the point, is okay with abstract thinking because they have, good imaginations and they can understand abstract concepts pretty well. And then there's the other people who just want like the instructions after the talking. Like they want the bullet point steps of what to do. And it's almost like they completely ignore the whole story and they're just like looking for and I didn't have any like bullet point steps of what to do. I was just like, here's some concepts. And, because that's how my mind works. And I realized, all right, I'm either going to edit that book or just in my second book, I'm going to make sure that I have that sort of like summary wrap up takeaway checklist thing at the end of the chapters.
Yeah, I'm actually torn about that myself. Like some part of me feels like you're like reading a textbook when you get to that, but I also appreciate it as a writer. I mean, a lot of people do it now. And the other thing is I worry that a lot of people will just read those and like so much of the nuance is not captured in those bullet points. So I'm like torn about it. I think there's such pros and cons to that. But it depends also on the kind of book, obviously. But yeah, I'm trying to think about ways to do it that aren't necessarily,
I think one of the things that hurt me is it did so well, and it's like niche or whatever you say. It did so well with CTOs that it became popular enough on Amazon to where like people who weren't in the industry or anything saw it as like, oh, this is an instructional book on like how to become a CTO. And I'm like, no. And so like I actually adjusted the descriptions because it was like a bunch of sales, 2 or 3 months. It was just going. It was like at the top of, Amazon for its category and everything, which is a great screenshot. Right. And then all of a sudden, boom, just like negative review. And I realized that it had just spilled over into a different audience.
The expectations had changed, or people were assuming it was one thing and then, not seeing that thing and thinking it was, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I adjusted the description significantly, like with caps and everything. I was like, this is a story. This is a story of how I became a CTO,
Totally. It's, but it's interesting that you tried one way, and a lot of people, I think, you have some kind of perfectionism thing that I have too, because a lot of people after that first year would have just been like, okay, well, let's just publish it and see what, but you were like, nah, it's not like where it needs to be. And then you like tried a whole other way to do it. But like, that's a lot of effort. That's like a big bummer to realize like, oh, okay, no, I have to do a whole different way. And I just think a lot of people aren't going to like deal with that. So, that's probably the reason that went over really well is like you really, this is your second crack at it. No one saw the first crack. This is like already the second edition, Yeah,
I'm excited. If you ever want to send me like an early copy of your book or something,
I'd be more than happy. Sure.
Yeah. One of the things I was curious about was, because I am a fan of like Elon Musk. I don't know how you could not be a fan of his, unless if you're like one of those 2 or 3 writers he has like a feud with, but they just do it for the popularity, right?
Totally.
And so I was just curious, like, what it was like interacting with him. You got to interview him more than once, right?
Yeah. He was very available. I think he thought that like the messaging of their, teaching the world about why those companies exist and what they're actually trying to do. I think he thinks it's really important. And so he actually put some effort into helping with this, which was great. It was great to get to dig deep with him. I talked to a bunch of his staff, and I could ask them a lot. At first, I just did a ton of research. So I didn't want to waste anyone's time here. I wanted to learn, anything I could learn online, I wanted to. Then I filled in a bunch of gaps with his staff. And with him, I tried to keep it to like the big picture, like what is the future going to be like and what scares you about it? And why are these companies helping to make the future better? And, so that was fascinating. Obviously, he's like, a very well-rounded thinker. He thinks a lot about history and, he loves sci-fi, and he's obviously, everyone knows he's a very big thinker, but he truly is in a very like, he's always thinking about the kind of, really big story. What's the big story going on? And to him, that story, could end well or not well. And I could have a happy ending or not, or a happy next chapter or not. And he wants the story to go on for a long time, and he wants it to be a good story that everyone's happy to live inside of. And from there, he kind of says, okay, what are the big threats to that vision? What could make this a short story or a bad future story? And what's the best thing that we could be doing? What are the best things we could be doing to try to mitigate those existential risks and increase our probability of that good future? And it's as simple as that. I mean, every one of his companies stems from that initial kind of brainstorm. And then the companies themselves, when you dig in, they're doing such cool things. The technology is super cool in each of these things. They're so like just awe-inspiring, you know, these incredible machines they're building in different areas. And so, yeah, I couldn't think of a more fun group of companies to write about. I got very lucky and very fortunate that I had the chance to do that.
Yeah, you're amplifying good stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. It makes for great blog posts, because this is the exact kind of thing I wanted to write about anyway. But, you know, to me, it's just like the Fermi Paradox. Big zoom out on what's really going on, and then like, how could we solve it, and why this matters, and what's exciting about the next 5 years, and all the stuff I like writing about anyway. And then, yeah, I really believe in the mission of these companies, and if I can do a tiny part to like help more people, I think, help people maybe apply to work there that wouldn't have, or just help people support it that may not have, then I want to put any effort I can to that.
Yeah, I've struggled with like I've gone back and forth on wanting to interview him. Like when I first started, obviously, I definitely wanted to interview him because it would be like the coolest thing in the world. But then as as the platform grew and everything changed, I started thinking like, I watch a lot of his interviews. Like I watch his Joe Rogan interviews. When he posts stuff online, he'll do some YouTube interviews, and he does a lot of interviews. And so I'll watch them, and then I get a real feeling, like an understanding of him. I think one thing that's sort of almost underreported in the different interviews, or that interviewers don't pick up on, is like his self-sacrificing nature. The fact that he's like working and doing all of this because he wants to ensure a better future for humanity. I mean, it's almost always just like a passing thing. And I never hear interviewers like dig into like why, he's like that.
Yeah. He doesn't like to, he usually wants to talk about the companies themselves and what he's doing. And, I think he often like probably won't dig into that kind of question, but yeah, I mean, maybe you should try to get him on and ask him.
Well, that's what I was struggling with. I was like, obviously like my team wants me to do it and like pursue it, but I was saying like, unless he's doing such important work out there, right? And he's running these companies and he's doing this stuff. And it's like, if I'm going to take up like some of his time, I want to be able to ask him something super like unique things that he hasn't covered 100 times in all his other interviews. And so until I have those questions, like I'm not going to waste his time. And then B, something that would like bring value to the mission he's on. So I was like, when those things sort of come together, I'm a patient person, and I've gotten to do like every interview I've ever wanted to do. One of the coolest ones was the creator of the World Wide Web. I got to meet that guy, the guy that created
Tim Berners-Lee.
Yeah.
That guy should be so much more famous than he is.
I know. I asked him, I was like,
Bill Gates. Like he is it's just crazy. But like he kind of invented the internet, or whatever
I got roasted on this.
World Wide Web again. Like it's very. Is it now the thing that like www? I mean that is right. So like he kind of invented the internet, or what? Like
yes. So
explain.
I got schooled on this, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I hang out with like nerds. I mean, like the smartest people in technology in the world. And so I was going around saying like, oh, I got to interview the creator of the internet. And someone's like, whoa, buddy, slow down. You got to interview the creator of the World Wide Web. Right. And I was like, okay.
By the way, that was David Mazieres, the inventor of the Stellar cryptocurrency network.
Oh yeah.
That's the one who schooled Joel on that, which I think is important.
Yeah. And we let that air for sure, because it's important. So like, I'll give you the brief thing. There's several layers of the internet, like what we call the internet. You got like the fiber optic cables that are like underground. Then you have, there's these layers, and there's actually a graph an infographic I can send you that is very common.
There's like the physical internet, which is like a network of wires and
Yes, it's actually like, it's literally a web like spun around the earth. Like there's these giant ships and they have them over they're on the ocean floors. Like it's literally a web of wires around the earth. I know. Like right now when we're talking, data is like being transformed, bouncing as light around like the world, or at least between our two locations. And that's how we're seeing each other and talking to each other. It's like
wild.
Bouncing light.
Just happened.
I know.
You zoom out, like this is like yesterday, this whole thing wasn't here, and now it's here. It's a crazy time. I mean, we're so used to it. The internet is not normal. It's an insane thing that's here.
I know. And we've only had electricity for 110 years.
Right. This all just started. Like
I know.
It's like people who are alive today, like their grandparents grew up before any of this stuff. But anyway.
I actually, one thing stood out to me in one of your Fermi articles, or a part of it, is something there to the tone of are humans advanced 1,000 years, or humans advanced 1 million years, would look back at us as like monkeys, as like what we're doing, right? Like socially. Yeah. And I was like, that's so true, because I've always had this thought, don't know where it came from, probably just the life. When I see the little aliens, I'm like, I think those are just future us's. Like after we figured out genetic engineering and like, I think that's probably just like, what if that's just the evolution of DNA, and that's where we end up. And maybe we're just like, they are like, hey, we figured out everything. Let's just go start it over.
Start what over?
Like life, like let life start over. Oh, and like maybe like this aliens like created us.
Oh yeah. I definitely think that we might have a creator, like as someone who was all like a proud atheist a while back. I'm like, wait, that's dumb, because like I cannot believe in like the Bible or the Quran and still be very open about like it's probably likely we do. I mean, it could be the simulation creator, or it could be aliens planted us as crops somehow. Or they're farming something. Could be some philanthropic thing. They want to spread life through the universe and spread consciousness, and who knows? But like, I also think one of the things about the Fermi Paradox that crosses my mind is that we might be looking for things in the physical world, and it might be at some point that you just like the physical world, you just leave that and you go into some virtual world, and not the way we do it with physical servers, but way cooler than that. Something where they're going into some quantum with some virtual something, but where they control everything and they don't rely on physical kind of universe anymore for anything. And so we're looking at the physical world for where are they, but it's like that's like apes looking in like chimps looking in the trees, being like, well, where are there humans? And no, they're not in the trees, so they're nowhere. It's like, no, we left the trees a long time ago. We're in houses, way better. And maybe they're in the equivalent of that. And like, the physical universe is like big, way too big and cold and dangerous, and you need resources. And so I don't know. There's just a lot. It's so much of the thinking we do when we imagine big questions like that, either the far future or things like alien life. We're really applying a lot of what we know to it, and assuming that a lot of these things hold in way crazy different situations. And it's probably a fallacy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can take like truths of the universe and then try to like abstract them out. Like for one, like living things grow and replicate, right? Like that's what they grow and they replicate and they expand. And so we think about that. It happens on all of these different levels. It happens on our cellular level, happens in our social level. Like, we have kids or we have families or whatnot, but like, why would it just stop? If it happens on all of these levels up the stack, like, why would it just stop at civilizations?
Yeah. Well, maybe because replicating and growing is a very like, oh, that's like an animal thing to do. But we're trans animal now, and we don't like, we don't we don't replicate anymore. Like there are like a certain number of consciousnesses, and we don't create new ones for some ethical reason. But we also don't die, because replication is needed if you die, right? So if you can't have death without replication, or that everything's over. So maybe when you get rid of death, and it's like, oh, now we're all like uploaded in this virtual thing. There's no like death unless you're sick of being conscious. Maybe then replication would stop.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting topics.
but what's the World Wide Web?
What's the World Wide Web? It would require a pretty
lengthy. The physical internet. So what did Tim Berners-Lee create?
So I believe the best way to explain it would be like a web page, like the HTTP browsers, stuff that you're experiencing through your browsers would be sort of like the easiest way to explain it.
He came up with like a system.
Yeah, he was at CERN.
A software-based system to use this physical network in a way that was like usable and efficient or something.
Yeah. So there's SSH, which is, not the World Wide Web. It's a way of communicating between machines. I could like send you data and things of that nature, but we've got to exchange these private keys and log in a certain way. So it's just like machine to machine. So you think of the internet as like a computer that like exposes a certain section of that computer to anyone who wants to view it publicly, right? So before domains, we had IP addresses. Like that's why you have bookmarks. Bookmarks in your browser is like a legacy thing, because you wouldn't want to type in 76.142. whatever to get to the place you want to go. And so it started out, computers, we had the terminal, right? And so we could SSH, and it was just text, and we would do it like that. And then slowly browsers came, and he developed it out of a project at CERN, and as a way to share information broadly, from what I understand. So he developed it from CERN as a way to share information broadly and publicly.
Wow. Is he really rich? He should be so rich.
I don't know, but he's a cool guy.
Created like the biggest thing ever. Like everyone who writes www, like that's because he invented that. Like that's right. It's nuts.
Yeah, and he's making a second one, man, which is even cooler.
Wow.
If you do some writing on like data privacy and like the future of data privacy, checking out his new like project that they're working on that's why we had him on, because it was like, okay, Tim Berners-Lee's creating like a second internet, and so we're like, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, the two industries I'm convinced are not going anywhere are data privacy and cybersecurity, which are similar, related, but like it's as more and more data goes on these things, and maybe some of the computers end up in our brains. That's actually a thing of the future probably. And the more AI that can like hack in and like grab people's things, and it's just going to be like kind of a battle of people trying to keep things safe and people trying to break those systems like that. I don't see that going anywhere for many decades.
Oh yeah, have you ever looked into the people? There's a documentary on Amazon Prime, I think, called Cyborgs Among Us. People are just like embedding electronics into their bodies.
Oh yeah. Well, this is what an Elon Musk point is. He says that all people are cyborgs now, or anyone with a phone is a cyborg or computer. And at first I was kind of like, well, no, I mean, we can act like a cyborg if we're holding a phone. And he's like, no, you are a cyborg. And you can get information from anywhere you want into your brain, like instantly with, just like, and you can talk to anyone, anywhere. And, when it clicked for me is when I kind of realized that what he's saying is true, because if only this phone were on the inside of my skin instead of the outside, officially 100% would be a cyborg. So who cares what side of the skin this thing is on? So if the phone then becomes a brain machine interface in your brain where you can now call this stuff up just by thinking it, asking it as a thought, getting the answer, it's not that material a difference. I mean, the difference is only in like how high tech the cyborg capabilities are and how seamless it is. But it's like the important thing is that we have we're low grade cyborgs. We're kind of not very impressive cyborgs, but we are, that we're in that category now, and it's kind of crazy. And that's just
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he said that, I was like, yeah, dude, it's just a bandwidth problem. It's just a speed problem. It's just because my brain has to go through my fingers to type it and then get the information back.
Yeah, we're just bad cyborgs. We're really 1.0 cyborgs right now. And he wants to make us really good cyborgs so that we can protect ourselves against AI.
I'll give us some love, though, because like 50 years ago, we were walking to a library to try to get information from old printed books that were old.
Yep. And I mean, again, if we take a zoom out here, 500 years ago, which is still yesterday in the bigger scheme of things, that's less than 1% of human history ago. There were no printed books. So there was no printed books. Now what you have is, scrawled writing. Now, if you go back 5,000 years, which is now, again, we're talking, a couple percent of human history, there's no writing at all. So everything that is known is just contained in human brains. The body of human knowledge is passed on through language and contained in brains. And that's it. The only hard drives that contain the info are brains. There's no other. And it's just the accumulation of knowledge, via these other things is extremely new. And it's like, it's easy to feel like when you're born into a world that it's normal. But we live in an anomaly within a bigger anomaly within a bigger anomaly within
Let's
human.
Party.
And human history itself is an anomaly. It's a strange 100,000 years for our species that no other species has had anything like this before. So this is a very crazy time to be a human.
I'm pumped up. Did you hear about Zuckerberg's plan for the metaverse?
I did not.
Yeah, dude, Zuckerberg won. Have you seen the series on, I think it's like Hulu, called Upload, where they're putting their consciousness into the cloud?
No.
Dude, all right. I want you to write on, I'm sure so many people tell you this type of stuff, but man, the future of consciousness, you could take like the Neuralink. Have you written on Neuralink specifically?
Yeah, I wrote a really long, thorough thing about Neuralink.
Did you like hypothesize about the future with Neuralink?
Oh yeah, it's the most fun game. Is what is gonna what will we be able to do in 2040? Like, we might be able to think with each other and show each other what our eyes are seeing, and play for each other what our ears are hearing, and play music directly into our brains, and call up information right into our brains, which basically means we know that stuff. I mean, what is knowledge? You don't have everything on the top of your mind at all time. If I want to remember what year something was, I still have to go kind of dig into my brain, retrieve that info, right? There's still that process. It's not just like immediately on the tip of my tongue. And so it's just a different kind of retrieving info. So instead of having to retrieve it from the neurons in your brain, you're retrieving it from the cloud, but it's either way, it's all happening inside your brain. So it's like suddenly we all know everything. It's very intense. It's a lot of fun. I'm excited. I'm going to get one.
I look forward to it.
Well, one of the things Neuralink is doing is, it's not just of course, the software will get better and better and better. They'll have Neuralink 5 and Neuralink 8, just like the iPhone 12, iPhone 13, same thing. But the hardware is what they're also doing, the implantation process. They do not want this to be invasive or dangerous or expensive or slow or painful or anything like that. They want it to be like LASIK. You go in, hopefully your insurance covers it, or you can go on a payment plan so that, anyone in the US who can afford, cable can afford to get one of these. And eventually even cheaper. Eventually it'll be something that is, maybe covered so everyone can have one. I mean, right now, smartphones, it's hard to find people on Earth that don't have smartphones. I mean, I've been in some, I was in visited Nigeria, and I spent a week with this family, and they had nothing. They lived in a little place that had, their rent was $5 a month. And, I bought a bag of rice, and he was saying, my mom will use this for 6 months. This is great. This $50 bag of rice was a huge deal. They had smartphones. The kids had smartphones. So to me, that's where this will go eventually. And the point is that it'll also be easy. You'll go in, I'll say, okay, I have the Neuralink 6. I want the Neuralink 10. I haven't upgraded in a while. Still on the 6. So I can't share those, those sounds in high quality the way you can. I want to go get the better one. So you go in for a 2-hour appointment or 1 hour thing, and this machine safely takes the old one out, puts the new one in, patches you up. There's some local anesthesia, and you walk out and you're like, oh wow, this is so much more fun. Oh yeah, look at all this stuff I can do now with my head, because that's the device now, is your head. So this is all, and by the way, Neuralink has not told me much of this. This is all my fantasy here. But I do think, some of that is based on, the machine they're using. A lot of this is based on stuff they told me. But from there, you can just have a fun time imagining.
Oh, I love it. I love thinking about this stuff. That's why I was so excited when I saw that series called Upload, because they just visualize it in a really unique way. And, then all the social behavioral stuff comes out around it. And it's just kind of, I think you would enjoy it if you like thinking about that type of stuff.
So it's Upload. It's a series, you said?
Yeah. It's like, it's only one series or like one season of something, but basically, they live in the real world, and then there's also this like metaverse, and when you die, if you die correctly, or if you go in like before you die, you can get your consciousness uploaded. But then there's like different tiers, like, because it's all monetized, and so different people live in the different tiers, and then there's a story that goes with all of it that makes it compelling and interesting.
Sounds great. Sounds very up my alley.
So I want to give you a couple shout outs. The one for the book. Does the book have a title yet?
Thinking about the story of us, but still making that final decision.
Cool. And people will be able, do you have like a pre-registration on your website or anything for it yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But if anyone, if anyone's interested in this or like keeping up with what I'm doing, just sign up for the email list, which is you can find on the website, because that's the place where I like notify people what's going, what's happening or when.
Excellent. And then I saw did you just sell your company? Your
test prep company? Yes. One that was way back from when I was procrastinating in 2005 from doing music. And the credit for there goes mostly to my business partner, Andrew, who, while I've been doing WaitButWhy the last bunch of years, has been, working really hard growing that and the staff and, really long-term staff now. And they've just built something really good that actually was sellable. I never considered that like a tutoring company was something that we could sell. And when I started doing WaitButWhy, we probably couldn't have. So I'm very, very, very grateful that they just, they crushed it.
Awesome. No, I love it. I love what you're doing out there in the world. I'm a big fan. I look forward to future content. I want to make sure that we get you as much like publicity and things as possible. Was there anything else we want to plug or talk about?
No, for me, it's everything lives on WaitButWhy.com, and people should just go check it out there. And it's all in one place.